Hey, we're live.
Yeah, so we'll be streaming on YouTube instead. Goodbye
Hello,
to the
Dana.
metaverse.
Before we start, I guess we can read up Dana's, Oh, fe- go ahead, feel, it's nice to share pieces of literature that are for sure really nice. Um, Hello. Are you sharing your screen? Right.
Yes,
So,
I
I'll just
am.
read Dana's chat. Hi, I'm Dana from Times UP Ateneo, a feminist anti-GBV org. You can find our ongoing series of survivor stories here. Reading Sarah Ahmed's complaint. Oh, I haven't heard of that. Three of you heard of Sarah Ahmed? Oh, there's a lot of interesting links in the chat, but I guess let's go ahead and start. So hello everyone, welcome to this talk. Filipina Feminist Publishing. It's a talk by Gantala Press. So who is Gantala Press? So Gantala Press is an independent, nonprofit, volunteer-run Filipino feminist press that centers women's stories and issues in our projects. Publications, small press fairs, discussions, and workshops and in our participation in people's movements. They believe in the potential of feminist publishing as a social practice and in solidarity work with women artists and collectives as vital political action. You can learn more at this link that I'm going to be posting in the chat um, right now. And Yeah, this event is part of Develop Camp Fellowship, and it gathers ambitious creators invested in using technology to solve local problems. We're a collective of mission-driven technologists educating, researching, designing, and building experiences for social good in Southeast Asia together, and cultivate a lifelong community in the process. So, if you're interested in more events like these, feel free to join the Discord and Chia, can you get a link for the Discord? I don't have it right now. So yeah, and I'll just open the floor for Gantala Press to begin their talk on Filipino feminist publishing. You guys can start share your screen now and start.
Hi, good evening. Magandang gabi sa ating lahat. Teka lang, share screen ko lang yung, paano ba to? Oh my God. Ayan. Hello. Ayan, kita nyo na ba ako? Or naririnig? Am I clear? Or, okay, ayan. So, share screen ko lang to. For my presentation, we have Faye and I have divided our uh, talk into two parts. So she will be later sharing more about the feminist publishing. Ako pala si Roda Tahon. Volunteer din ako ng Gantala Press. So I think Gabriel have mentioned a lot of information about Gantala Press, but you can also check our website for more information and our Facebook and Instagram page, syempre. So my presentation is actually about um, the feminisms that Gantala Press has been pushing through for the past 6 years. So, yeah, wait lang. Paano ba to? Yan. Yan. Oh, wow. Ayaw niya. Naghanga siya. Ayan. So first, thank you muna sa Develop PH sa pag-invite sa amin at sa pagbibigay sa amin ng opportunity to um, share our work, and hopefully it's this opportunity would also open doors for us to collaborate on certain projects that would would uplift the issues of Filipino women, and of course applying, and of course on projects that apply technology and other sciences to um, develop more platforms for women to speak and share their narratives. So my presentation is entitled Lumili Ka, Lumalaban. So Gabriel have mentioned a while ago about the orientation of Gantala Press. So we are a feminist collective, and we are a nonprofit volunteer run. So we do it on a volunteer basis. And last year we called for, we had a call for volunteers for Gantala Press. So if sana in the near future, pag magko-call ulit kami ng volunteers, you can apply and work with us. Yeah. So it has been, yun, binanggit naman kanina about the publications, the small press fairs, the discussions, and of course, we published books about and with women. It has been years since mainstream feminist publishing came to a halt, and most works that featured works of Filipina feminists and women from communities were already out of print and can only be found in libraries and personal collection, almost accessible to the reading public. So in 2015, a group of women composed of writers, artists, publishing advocates, feminists, community organizers founded Gantala, which meant spool yung sa pagtahi, di ba? With the aim of continuously producing works for and by women. So this is one of the quotes that a feminist sister, Ida Santos, has written in her poem entitled To the Young Women. Ano ba yung title no? Nakalimutan ko na. To the young women walking the path of feminism. So we are sisters when we recognize and touch each other's pains, like touching the glow of the moon when it seems so distant and impossible. So yung usapin ng feminism, hindi siya ganun kadaling, napaka-complex niyang topic, but for Gantala Press, we were able to, in the past 6 years of our existence, we were able to theorize and learn also from our experiences and our collaborative works, because we believe that feminist publishing is a political action, and it has the potential as a social practice and as an arena for solidarity with women and collectives in pushing for social transformation. So our feminism and our feminist politics are grounded in our progressive roots. Women, especially those coming from the margins, peasants, workers, fisher folks, indigenous women, and in LGBT experience worst form of discrimination, exploitation, oppression, and marginalization because of foreign domination, feudal and semi-feudal system, and bureaucrat capitalism. Feudal and patriarchal relations relentlessly subordinate and marginalize women, making them commodities and objects for the interests of the ruling classes. Misogyny, sexism, and militarism became the new normal and blatantly attacked the rights of Filipino women and LGBTQs. And you know, as the Duterte regime nears its end on 2022, we have witnessed how women experience the worst forms of human rights violations, ranging from violence against women, tumataas yung kaso ng violence against women in time of the pandemic, especially now, and worst forms of human rights violations of civil and political rights, the murderous drug war, and neglect and denial of basic social services, especially in these time ng COVID-19 pandemic. So in short, the situation necessitates us to become feminists, to push for the agenda of feminism and contribute to the efforts of the Philippine women's movement. As a feminist organization, we view feminism as critical analysis of the socio-economic, socio-political, and social-cultural aspects of a context or environment in order to understand how they shape the concepts of gender, especially women. So basically, it offers us a lens in order to analyze and understand why these contexts are happening, and in order to destroy the oppressive gender relations, we also must, or in order to fight to destroy the oppressive class relations, which is the root of the oppression, we have to fight we also have to fight against patriarchy. Feminism does not actually and must not detach itself from political and economic roots. And it means that upholding feminism means upholding better living and working conditions, not only for the women, but also their families and the nation as well. So we believe that feminism is a collective action. It is a collective struggle to uphold women's rights to equality, dignity, and freedom from all forms of discrimination, sexism, misogyny, and oppression. And as feminists, we also recognize the various layers of oppression among different groups of women, since not all women belong to the same class and race and ethnicity or group or even gender identities. As a feminist collective, we work closely and mutually with women, especially from the marginalized sectors, in projects that would raise public awareness on pressing issues such as genuine land reform, just wages and benefits, self-determination, violence against women, and human rights, and justice and peace. All of these are important issues that women in communities experience firsthand, yet their narratives are often dismissed or silenced and sometimes deemed as just stories by the literary community. So ano nga ba yung mga common misconceptions about feminism na yan, ilan dyan ay we are anti-male, may anti-male daw. Extreme, exclusionary, so major discussion yan sa mga feminist at mga women's organizations yung pagiging exclusionary daw sa mga ibang gender identities, so identify themselves as women. Rabid at hysterical. Akalain nyo yun, hysterical daw yung mga feminists. At it is Western bourgeois concept by middle-class women, and it's not daw applicable in the Philippine context. Also, some groups believe that it's not the primary struggle, and some misogynists believe that feminism actually destroys families and peaceful homes daw. Yon, in these times, syempre, napaka-imperative na yung mga feminists struggle against oppression. Are we anti-Duterte? Yes, because Duterte and his cohorts have embodied the worst forms of oppression among women, gaslighting, invalidating women's narratives, to the worst forms of government neglect and denial of social services, and attacks to human rights and violence against women. Really find it hard to imagine a pro-Duterte feminist. But yes, some feminists claim that they are feminists. Some pro-Duterte claim they are. And surprisingly, even in the literary community, women writers who associate themselves with feminism are patting the shoulders of Duterte. Concurrently, even pro-Duterte writers wield their powers to disarm young writers critical of this regime. How does one marry feminism and violence, diba? So, also, yan, kay Beyonce yung picture na yan. We have heard from liberal feminists that feminism is a lifestyle, is a brand, or a personal choice. We believe that we also believe in the notion that the personal is political, kasi yun naman yung pinupush talaga ng mga feminist groups. But the political is also social. So our efforts to raise awareness on feminism should actually not be confined within ourselves or within our circles. It should contribute towards the advancement of the women's movement, which is the forefront of the feminism. Gantala contributes to addressing the misconceptions about feminism through our work. And we publish Feminist, and yan. So sabi nga dito, one publishes to find comrades. So we don't just publish, we also ensure that these works that we produce or we publish are reflect the interests of women, of particularly those who are unable to raise their voices, those who are invisible and silenced by the system. And We publish feminist and class-conscious progressive materials. We conduct consciousness-raising activities to reach the widest audience and readers. So we encourage people to read also because hindi naman, the works would not be the indicator of the success of a produced work is if someone reads and someone makes a concrete action on what she or he reads or they read. We collaborate closely with women's organizations and people's organization in projects that highlights issues of women and other gender identities. And we take part in the struggle. Syempre, we join rallies. Some of us are community organizers. We join and staff of women's and people's organizations. Yun nga, yung mahahalagang mga works na na-produce namin lately, na i-share din naman ni Faye mamaya, ay halimbawa yung works ng political prisoners. This one, for example, this is a collection of, it's an anthology of works by Filipino lesbians na matagal na panahon na hindi nakapag-produce ng works, di ba? Tapos, this one, may mga may mga exhibit A and exhibit B. This one is an anthology, a collection of works, art and narratives and stories and poems by women political prisoners. So, yun, available ito sa Shopee at sa iba pang page ng Gantala. Yun, therefore, we do not just produce literature, but we produce a liberating literature, a literature with, for, and by women. So, about the feminist movement in the Philippines, we also trace our roots in the feminist movements in the Philippines, the Philippine women's movement in the and so far what we have learned from our sisters and comrades is that women's oppression is complex and it's more than just sexist discrimination as described in the Western notion of feminism. Inequality exists in all spheres, in public and in private lives, like in the family, in the workplace, in education, in religion, and in culture in general. And in the Philippines, we have so many layers of inequality from the issue of at the national, usapin ng class, usapin ng gender, usapin ng ethnicity, at iba pa. And so the current economic, political, and cultural conditions, of course, can be rooted in our colonial and semi-colonial and feudal and patriarchal system na nag-oppress at nag-exploit sa Filipino women. Therefore, hindi katulad ng mga nasa Western countries at iba pang mga distinct ang Filipino feminists dahil collective yung kanyang struggle at hindi individual. Hindi siya more like the personal part, but it's more of a collective struggle. And the women's movement in the Philippines were able to develop actually their own theories and viewpoint, which they utilize in analyzing and critiquing issues of women and in formulating strategies for change. So hindi dapat binabox yung mga women's organizations at women's movements sa mga theoretical strands like liberal, Marxist, socialist because in the Philippines, nag-evolve siya through the years at ganun din naman sa feminist publishing. So noong mga unang mga panahon, nakakonect din yung mga feminist works sa mga women's organization. Dala siguro ito ng pagkakaroon nila ng madaming partners, funding partners which were able to support the expenses and the needs for producing work. So, pero matagal na panahon na nag-stop ito dahil nag-iba din ng direksyon ang feminist movements at nag-focus sila sa advocacy at iba pang mga mahahalaga rin namang issues na kailangang itulak sa public arena. So ultimately, yan, yung women's movement sa Philippines, ultimately Filipino women's mobilizations have always been inextricably linked to the people's struggles of national sovereignty, national social justice, peace and democracy. Maaring magkakahiwalay o magkakaiba yung mga iba't ibang mga feminist organizations in the Philippines, but they still have this convergence and divergence in various issues. Pero syempre, their vision ultimately is for gender equality and women's empowerment. So, di ko na to masyadong tatalakayin yung highlights ng Philippine women's movement. Meron kaming tala nito sa website ng Gantala Press tungkol sa women's movement, yung kanyang pagbabaybay sa kasaysayan. And mababasa natin dito kung paano nga ba sumibol yung mga iba't ibang mga women's organizations, paano rin ba sumulong at ano rin ba yung kanilang mga setbacks in the previous years. So meron din siyang peak na panahon lalo na nung 1980s kung saan women's organizations have actually united and made a statement out of an organization named Gabriela, 'di ba? Noong 1980s ay talagang nag-unite lahat ng mga women's organizations. Pero syempre, hindi naman, nagpapatuloy pa rin siya as of this moment. So malaki pa rin, marami pa rin mga women's organizations at Philippines, yung Philippines pa rin yung isa sa mga pinakamalalakas na mga organisasyon ng kababaihan. Established din yung mga non-government institutions, tapos which later on came to serve specific interests such as research, documentation, capacity building, and others. And academic programs in women's studies have been pioneered to theorize and advocate gender equality. So, kung sa feminist publishing naman, ayun na pala yung huling slide. So, yung sa feminist publishing naman, nabanggit ko nga kanina, they are mainly connected with institutions like Gabriela, Center for Women's Resources, WIDPRO, Kalakasan, and St. Scholastica's College that produce literary and critical and theoretical works for and by women. Kaya lang wala na yung mga hindi na nagpa-publish masyado yung mga institutions na ito ngayon. Kaya yung mga writers and artists have continued to produce literature and art in other platforms. So yung iba nagko-contribute lang sa mga mainstream or nagpa-publish ng sarili nilang works. To date, women's organizations in various levels, grassroots, regional, and national levels remain the major stakeholders of Philippine feminisms, and the women's movement in the Philippines remain one of the most active feminist movements in the world because of its historical roots and its contributions to the global struggles for gender justice and equity. And however, despite these advancements in the women's movement and in the Philippines, one can help but wonder, are there still groups that are underrepresented? Oo naman. We need to make room for peasants, for workers, for indigenous peoples, fisher folks, women from the informal economy, migrant workers, transgender women, and other intersections kasi their voices are still not heard. Their stories must be told. And though the Philippines might appear gender equal on the surface dahil nga sa mga laws and issuances natin. Sa totoo lang, ang Pilipinas ang isa sa mga may pinakamaraming batas at issuances about gender equality at yun nga, pinupush nga ngayon yung SOGI Equality Bill, di ba? Nagpapatuloy pa rin naman yung exploitation and abuse at hanggat hindi nagbabago yung system, yung national system natin, hindi pa din sapat yun para mag-provide ng spaces for women. And ultimately, kailangan magkaroon ng pagkakataon yung kababaihan to adapt to these changing times, magkaroon ng access sa technology, magkaroon ng access sa iba't ibang forms ng innovations in order for them to have more meaningful spaces to discuss, create, collaborate, and struggle together. So, dahil nagbabago rin yung aspekto ng access ngayon sa information, kailangan din yung women's movement at iba pang mga organizations. Halimbawa kami tulad sa Gantala Press, kailangan din namin mag-upgrade dun sa kasanayan sa usapin ng technology dahil kailangan din namin sumabay dun sa mabumibilis na technology para mas maipaabot yung iba't maging magsilbing platform pa sa pagpapatampok ng mga issues and raising public awareness and consciousness on important issues that affect women. So, doon ko muna puputulin yung aking discussion. Ipapasa ko na kay Faye para sa pagpapatuloy. Salamat.
Yun. Magandang gabi. Salamat, Roda. I'll need to turn off my video later, no? Kasi yung internet connection is unstable. Kanina pa nagrereklamo yung aking internet connection. But thank you to Develop PH for inviting us to share about our work tonight. So I'll just share my screen. So in this part, no, we'll be talking about in this part, we'll be talking about how we have been trying to get by as a small press and literary collective in the pandemic. We'll be sharing about how we try to navigate both the analog and digital spaces. So I'll just stop my video. We are often asked about our experience transitioning from the analog to the digital when the pandemic happened. So actually, the changes in terms of practices were not so drastic because even before the pandemic, the bulk of our work was done online. So that included coordinating our publications through emails, managing our social media, and etc. No, and these tasks are still continue to this day. But what remains a challenge is really meeting in person. Wait. Before the pandemic, we have been organizing an all-women art fair where women artists are able to share their works without having to compete with men artists. Projects were formed during and after this all-women art fair. Now, it's hard for independent artists to sell or share their works unless they open an online shop. No? And many artists have gone in that direction, including Gantala Press. No? Meron kaming maliit na tindahan sa Shopee. Ayun. But online shops don't really provide the space or opportunity to connect closely with other artists or readers, to launch conversations or friendships the way that face-to-face fairs do. Thanks to technology, we're still able to connect with one another. We're still able to sell our books, continue our work. Most importantly, we are kept updated about not only in the book industry, but in our country. So, for example, a recent campaign that Gantala Press has taken part in is the call for the government to keep its hands off our libraries. Just a brief background for people who may not be aware of the issue. No? University libraries in Kalinga, Isabela, and Aklan have purged books and other reading materials related to the National Democratic Movement from their shelves. And this was done in compliance with the government's counterinsurgency campaign. So more than being an attack on our freedom of information and our right to proper education, this book purging affects activist small presses like Gantala in very specific. Our recent comics, no, Dawang, which means river in the Kalinga language. So Dawang talks about the Kalinga people's Chico River Dam struggle in the 1970s to the 1980s. No? The comics features indigenous women leaders like Betty Belen, who was red tagged and arrested on false charges. It also mentions the role of armed struggle in the victory against Chico Dam. So there are many lessons to be learned from the women of Kalinga, especially since there continues to this day. Irrigation pumps, hydroelectric projects, and dams continue to be built in that region, no? Without the consent, usually, of the indigenous peoples who live there. So how can we continue producing meaningful books like Dawang if they are constantly under threat of censorship? So last time we tried boosting an ad related to Dawang, no, on Instagram, and the 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 post was the boost was rejected kasi raw political, and it discusses daw the election, something parang ganon. So hindi kami pinayagan ng Facebook and Instagram to advertise our comics. A wonderful project undertaken by advocates is the Aswang sa Aklatan website, which collects statements against the book purgings and censorship, and archives quote-unquote progressive books and readings. So the book purgings have been compared to the burning of anti-German quote-unquote books during the Nazi occupation of Germany. So one advantage of the digital space that artists and activists have really seized and wonderfully crystallized in this Aswang sa Aklatan site is that digital books cannot be burned. No? They have 9 or more lives. Ayun. So if you check the website, you'll find a library of books by Engels, by Marx, by Mao, and other progressive books. No? Kasi syempre, kinakampanya din ng Aswang sa Aklatan website yung freedom of information and yung malayang palitan ng reading materials. So Gantala Press is often asked about our relationship to the analog and digital. Our response is we use digital technology to serve the 99%. The majority of Filipinos, most of whom do not have access to digital technology. As artists and activists, we still try our best to literally show up in analog spaces. No? For example, in protest rallies, in basic masses integration, in producing printed books to give to real live persons. So for itong picture sa kanan is a picture of Lumad students reading our books, no? Because we donated some of our books to a Lumad school in Mindanao. So we're asked if it is possible to use digital technology to reclaim our history in this age of disinformation. And that is what we have been trying to website, our podcast, webinars, and our social media. But doing so can only accomplish so much. Contrary to how it seems, going digital is a privilege that only a small portion of Philippine digital is impossible and impractical, as long as our society remains semi-colonial and semi-feudal, where majority of our country's resources are controlled by the 1%. If you want to know who, there are those who just look at the Forbes list of richest Filipinos. Yeah. Aside from our natural resources, the 1% also controls information and communication technology in the country, and they use it to stay in power or to return to power, as in the case of the Marcoses. So we live in an age of disinformation and fake news, and it will take an impossibly large amount of money and power to counter that. No? If we look at distance learning, children of the 99% find it hard to keep up with distance learning because of their lack of access to proper equipment and resources. And their parents work under inhumane conditions every day to try to put food on the table. So as you can see, the injustices that happen online affect what happens. The injustices that happen offline affect what happens online, and vice versa. And publishing carries the important task of resisting these injustices and ultimately changing society. No? So how do we do that? We do that by joining the people's struggle in general and by producing books that serve the 99% in particular. So when I say 99% or 1%, no, the population, Filipino population. So of course, yung 99%, is composed of the farmers, the peasant sector, no, the fisher folks, indigenous peoples, workers, the urban poor, ganyan. And the petty bourgeois, ayan, mga petty bourgeois na katulad natin. Kasama tayo sa 1%, 99%. Ayan. So as mentioned, majority of the 99% do not have access to digital technology. which is not to say that we're succeeding in reaching the 99% with our printed books, no? Because being a small press, we can only afford to print 1,000 copies of our books at the most at a time. Ganyan. So anyway, there's really only one way to reclaim history and narratives at this point, and that is revolution. So if we're able to use digital technology to open the people's eyes to all of the disinformation and injustice that are happening, if we're able to use it to bring the people to the streets, no, to oust the president and install a nationalist, democratic, and scientific government, then we would have done our job as a small press and as artists. 2021 is our most productive year to date, ironically, no, despite the pandemic. We're able to publish 6 books so far and are working on three more this month. So maybe at this point we can share a little bit about these books just to give you an idea of our work and how we managed to continue producing during the pandemic. So My Mother is More Than a Comfort Woman, a storybook in 3 languages, Filipino, Japanese, and English. It's about the life of some of our lolas, or the former sex slaves during World War II. We worked with the organization Lila Filipina in producing this book. Dawang, Kababaihang Tagapagtanggol ng Cordillera, as mentioned earlier. It's about the Kalinga people's struggle and victory against this destructive project of the former dictator Ferdinand Marcos and the World Bank. So we could not travel to Kalinga to do our research on this project, but our consultant, Inabuyog Kalinga, generously shared media and other research materials for us to use. We produced Wildfire, Filipina Lesbian Writings in celebration of Pride Month, and are happy to have received contributions from young aspiring writers. In our books, we wish to break the usual practice in publishing where only experienced writers are invited to contribute their works. I think that one thing that we try to accomplish with our works is for the public, for the ordinary Filipino or Filipina, to not be intimidated by reading, writing, making books, making art. We believe that anyone can write, anyone can make comics or zines, anyone can make art. We believe that writing takes many forms, whether poetry or narration or song. So, yun. Meanwhile, kapatid, tulad ng pinakita ni Roda kanina, families and friends of political prisoners collaborated with us in publishing Saloobin, mga akda ng at para sa kababaihang bilanggong politikal, which is the first anthology of its kind in the country. This project emphasizes how specific and unique women's struggles are, even in problems that the Filipino people collectively face. Ayan. COVID-19 Journals was co-produced and co-published with Women Writing Women Philippines and features essays by single mothers, migrant workers, informal workers. Lutong Gipit, mga recipe sa panahon ng krisis, was put together with the Amihan National Federation of Peasant Women and Rural Women. It's being used to raise funds to buy farm tools for peasant communities, especially those in militarized areas. It also helps amplify the call for and production assistance for our food security frontliners, because we know that they're the first to be ignored by the government when crises and disasters strike. Makisawsaw Community Gardens Edition is the second volume of plant-based food security. Its goal is to raise funds to support a community kitchen project in Payatas and Tondo, or urban poor communities in those areas. So having partner organizations, publishers, yung binabanggit ni Roda kanina na collective creation, having partners has helped us finish our tasks on time. Our community grows with each book that we publish because of our partners. Amihan has been connecting us to communities like Lupang Ramos in Cavite, where at least 2 women poets live. Our recent comics has connected us to indigenous women and cultural groups in the Cordillera. And we continue to meet women leaders and women writers in projects like COVID-19 Journals and the upcoming Sulatan letter writing project. So when we look at our community, we see women leaders, mothers, young women, aspiring and professional writers, and activists. It has been difficult for everyone to maintain and nourish their communities during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had hoped to open our own space or workshop where we could gather, meet, and create together. Now we have to make do and make the most of Zoom. We have been trying to maintain a regular schedule for educational discussions, no, even a book club. And we have started a podcast and have so far managed to regularly produce content for it. So Gantala is also the national coordinator of Southeast Asia Feminist Action Network, or CFAM, a network of young grassroots feminist organizations in the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, which demonstrates how natural it is for women to come together during a crisis, no matter where they are in the world. Project we're excited about is Sulatan, which aims to connect women in the Philippines, United States, and Australia through the traditional medium of handwritten letters. I think this project demonstrates how technologies can work together. No? So we were approached by the Filipina writers Merlinda Bobis and Joy Barrios and asked if we could be their partner in this project. So of course, we said yes, and immediately invited women leaders from various sectors, such as the peasant sector, urban poor sector, indigenous communities, etc., to participate in the project. Some of the women were excited to join because this brings them back to their childhood when they exchanged letters with their OFW fathers. So we hope to publish a book of letters on Women's Month next. Just the last note on audience. We don't really think about our audience, but we are always guided and the wish that more people get to access our books. We are guided by the hope and wish that we can someday afford to print thousands of copies of our books to make them affordable. The wish is for the regular Kalinga student to be able to afford to buy dawang, for example. Another wish is for someone to bring our books abroad because we do have a small following among Filipinas in some countries who yearn to connect to the motherland. I think they can find in our books an honest situationer of what is happening in the country. As our community of collaborators grows with each book, so does our audience and our readers. So do our audience and our readers, rather. We are grateful and thrilled whenever we hear that our books are listed down as required readings in universities. We're ecstatic whenever we hear about women buying our books to give to their crushes or to their girlfriends. Meron kaming may bumili ng wildfire dati sa Shopee na parang kinulit niya kami kung kailan daw namin isi-send kasi apparently hinahabol niya date nila ng kanyang I think girlfriend na niya ngayon. So we consider it the ultimate form of validation when peasant women leaders, Nanay Tess, who's here in the photograph in the left, and Nanay Miriam of Lupang Ramos trusted us enough to share their poems with us to publish. So to put it simply, as long as we as a feminist small press strive to publish good books that serve the 99%, we find that the audience finds us. They stay with us, they grow with us, and hopefully they wish to create the same kinds of books that we do. Yun lamang po. Salamat.
Thank you. Bianca, are you here?
Are there questions?
Can I be heard? Yes, thank you so much, Gantala Press, for that insightful and wonderful talk. So now we will proceed to the Q&A portion of this event. So, question, can you talk more about your views on authorship / co-authorship?
Sige, I'll try to answer and then maybe Rhoda will add. Yun, we always emphasize the collective nature of creating. No, lagi. Yun, we don't really, if you look at our books, no, most of them are written by collectives, by groups, or written collectively, no, and we don't really, like, we have only a few books that were written by individual authors, or that have like bylines of individual authors on the cover, ganun. So yun, we always write our statements, for example, collectively. As mentioned, no, we don't assign, as much as possible, we don't assign only one person to work on a piece of writing. Ganon. So we always consult with the others. Ganon. Yun. Yun. And then yun, hindi kami masyado sa individual bylines. Gusto namin na pag mas maraming contributor doon sa libro, mas gusto namin. And that's what we've also noticed, no, sa maraming mga libro na napoproduce ngayon, na parang may isang nagtanong sa amin, bakit kaya halimbawa yung mga libro na that are up for an award, no, that are up the books that are up for the National Book Awards, or basta for some literary award, no, puro sila author ng mga lalaki, no. So bakit kaya ganoon, no? And parang napansin ng iba rin sa amin na most of the books that are produced by women are written collectively talaga. So anthologies, o kaya ayun, no, yung may mga libro ng Gantala, puro maraming babae lagi nagko-contribute. No? So yan.
Thank you so much. All right. For the next question, someone here is asking po if can we join your book club daw, and if so, how?
Si Clark, who leads our education committees here, so maybe Clark can answer.
Hello, Clark. Are you?
Hello po. Ayun po. Yun po. From EDCOM head po ako ng Gantala Press. So, every month po yung book club. Usually sa internals po siya open. Pero we also open it to the public, yung discussion. So, siguro nagpo-post naman po kami sa page. I think usually at the start of the month kung ano po yung book na itatakal. So, usually mga works po siya ng Gantala. So, yes, free to join. Share namin yung link. PM lang po pag nag-post po kami ng announcement. And we'll send the Zoom link for you to join the discussion. So, ayun lang po.
Sa FB, di ba? Sa FB page yung mga announcements tungkol sa book club.
Apo. Sa FB lang po.
Sige, sige. Thank you so much. Another question. Thank you, Gab, for dropping Gantala Press's Facebook page. Do you sell digital copies of these books? And if so, where can the audience find and support
Our
Yeah.
books. So as mentioned earlier, we opened a Shopee store. Ayun. So we're operating from our small apartment dito sa Makati. You can buy sa aming Shopee, and then some of our PDFs are also available on payhip.com/Gantala Press. Ayun. And then we also try to join physical fairs as much as possible, or as much as we can. So halimbawa, lagi kami sa mga agroecology fairs, ganyan, no? So katabi namin nagbebenta ng suka, mga gulay ng mga farmers, kaya tas yung booth namin, doon namin binibenta yung aming mga libro. And then we also consign to small bookshops like Mount Cloud in Baguio, Popular Bookstore. Ayun. We don't usually consign sa malalaking bookstores out of principle. In principle, no, kasi yun, for one we could not we can't afford the tawag dyan, yung consignment fee. masyadong malaki yung consignment fee. Hindi namin kaya. And yun, also to support small businesses and small enterprises.
Thank you so much. And here's a question from Nikki, one of the volunteers in Develop. Since we're also a volunteer-run collective, we're curious to know what difficulties you're dealing with and how to overcome these difficulties and keeping your contributors engaged, especially in a remote setup. Po.
Baka Roda can answer.
Ayun.
Ma'am
Hello. Okay. So yung how do we sustain given na ganito yung kalagayan? Gantala is also, always conducts a regular meeting kahit sa Zoom or sa anumang paraan virtually, nagkukumustahan at ini-ensure na yung mga committees din namin nag-work din siya virtually kasi parang tsaka lang naman lumawak yung mga committees ng Gantala nitong pandemic. Yun yung naging positive side ng pandemic sa amin na somehow nako-convene namin madalas regularly yung collective. So monthly nagmi-meeting kami tapos yung mga committees din nagmi-meeting din sila panapanahon para i-discuss yung activities. At saka yun, major talaga yung part ng aming mga meetings yung kumustahan, personal at how are they coping, how are they moving forward kahit sa ganitong napaka-challenging na situation. So I think yung i-share namin na experience dun ay dapat gawing regular yung communication at open yung communication lines sa pagitan ng mga members at saka mga volunteers para ma-engage sila at mabigyan dapat sila lagi ng mga activities at saka mga tasks para makapag-share sila kasi syempre ngayong virtual lahat ng mga bagay-bagay madalas mahirap ma-sustain yung interest ng mga volunteers at kung marami kayong mga volunteers mahirap talaga sila manage pero dahil nag-work kami on a committee system so yung mga committees meron talaga silang mga ini-ensure talaga ng mga committees na panapanahon ay nakakapag-consultation at nakakapag-usap-usap yung mga members. So yung communication lang naman talaga yung mahalaga. Although yung challenging talaga yung internet. Katulad ngayon, unstable na yung internet ko. Pero yun.
Thank you so much for that answer. Another question from the audience. Can you share about your personal or shared writing practices and maybe provide tips on carving out time to write? Thank you.
Personal writing. Actually, isa yan sa mga sa gusto naming gawing consolidating activity para sa aming mga members and volunteers na yung halimbawa magkaroon ng writing workshop, etc. And we've attempted to do that by holding a poetry writing workshop in support of the Defend Peasant Women campaign ng Amihan, no? So yun, we tried to discuss poetry and how poetry can help parang put forward or advocate yung mga issues ng mga peasant women, no? So yun yung ginawa namin to poetry writing workshop. Ganun.
Thank you. And I guess the last question from Chia. Yeah. Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say pa? Sorry.
Yeah. Pasensya yung aming connection eh. Pero yung mas challenge yung pagsusulat ngayon. Pero at the same time, naturuan din kami kung paano magsulat ng mabilis Halimbawa kasi sa dami ng issue na dumarating, parang matitrain ka rin talaga na magsulat ng mabilis na statement, dapat malinaw agad sa iyo yung analysis mo sa mga issue, tapos ma-connect mo agad siya dun sa sinusulat mo. So, okay din siyang training pagsusulat. Of course, hindi yun ordinarily matatawag na literary, yung mga pagsulat statement, pagsulat ng paggawa ng mga prop materials sa SOCMED, ganon. Us to use our skill sulong yung ating mga kinakampanya. Yun lang naman.
Thank you for sharing po. Okay, Chia, do you still have a question?
Yes.
To-
Okay, this starts off as more of a comment, but just wanted to thank you for your time. Even if the internet connection was bad, I learned so much from this talk, and I really enjoyed learning more about the work that your press has been doing and your general approach and ethos to publishing. I think it's very admirable, and Develop has been thinking about a lot of these questions similarly. And like personally, as someone who is like a non-binary and queer, just like writer at times, I feel like spaces like this are especially important and are something I sorely lacked growing up in the Philippines. Like, I feel like majority of exposure to groups like this generally happens at the collegiate level, just like anecdotally. But in high school, I think, where I was really facing questions about identity and was starting to think about like queerness and like feminism and politics more seriously, I didn't really have spaces to do so. And like Gantala Press would have been like an amazing presence if I had known about you guys earlier. So I guess the question is, I am curious to know what your relationship has been in general, or like to student participation in the press. Like, how have you been engaging with student communities? Um, how do you think students can get more involved in these literary scenes? Especially, I guess, at the high school level, before one is exposed to like college organizations that traditionally deal with this, like especially with questions of technology, and social media presence being like your primary avenues of dissemination. Like, I'm wondering like how can that be leveraged to reach out to more students who are definitely in need of more representation, and spaces to explore their identity early on. Sorry, that's so long. But thank you.
Okay lang. Okay ba yung connection or unstable daw kasi? Okay lang? Okay. So, thank you for the question. Actually, I think two of our members are high school teachers, no? So, and they're also writers, no? So they're very aware of how high school, how high school children students are now, no? Their needs, their interests, ganon. So that's for us. In terms of like reaching more students, nagsisimula, parang kumbaga lumalalim naman yan activist na na part ng aming gawain, no? So for example, by resisting yung mga ginagawang oppression ng state sa ating mga estudyante, no? Sa pagsali sa mga calls na yon na tigilang bullying, big eskwela, no, na or yon yung bigyan ng access ang mas maraming mga high school students sa online, sa mga resources para mas sila sa online learning, no. Ayun, sa tingin namin mas doon na kumbaga natutumbok yung yung aming mithiin na maabot yung mga high school students. So hindi necessarily nakalimit sa sa publishing work lang for yung mga libro or aming mga social media accounts, no, kundi mas doon sa paglahok namin bilang mga artist, bilang isang collective, doon sa mas malaking struggle na maayos yung kalagayan ng mga students ng high students na to. So ayun, yun, so we make sure, no, we make sure that ganyan, and then we make sure to express our of yun, yung mga their benefit yung ganyan. So yun yung isa, and then pag sa publishing, as I we're open to contributions by young high school students, college. Wala sa amin, basta nagsulat ka, okay yung sinulat mo, alam mo yun, isama na natin sa libro, parang ganun. You don't need to be a previously published writer to be able to be included in our parang ganun. Ano pa ba? Sagot ba yung question? Ayun. And then, ayun, basta kapag merong mga mas malalaking issues concerning high school students or students in general, no, we make sure to express our support doon sa mga issues na yon. And yun, yung aming support, parang it takes many forms, no, hindi naman libro agad or what. Basta makapagsulat kami ng statement of solidarity or message of support, ganon. I think yun yung aming naitutulong.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
that answer. This question from Dania naman. While I do understand na people may have varying opinions on subjects and perhaps this may not be answered singularly by Gantala as a collective organization, she wonders po about the stance of current representatives from Gantala sa conference na to po. No, what kind of conference? May you please expound on that question?
Or
In the
this,
meantime,
ito bang webinar? Ito bang webinar or itong di ko rin masyadong clear yung yan, paki-expound siguro. Or siguro kung on our part, syempre thankful kami sa opportunity na binigay sa amin ng Develop PH as an organization, because this would probably open more doors for us to collaborate and probably work with varying issues that affect women and the people and Filipino people in general. So, masaya kami na nandito kami ngayon at kasama namin kayo at ka-work namin kayo, at hopefully in the near future ay makapag-discuss pa tayo ng ibang pamamaraan so that ma-improve din natin yung iba't ibang platforms to reach wider public, kasi 'di ba nabanggit nga kanina ni Faye about that yung sa high school students, sa college students, at actually hindi naman nagsasara ang Gantala Press with regards to providing discussions with high school students or collegiate level students at the collegiate level or teachers para maintindihan din nila na wag silang matakot sa concept ng feminism at wag din silang matakot sa concept ng activism as an important component of our important component of our democratic system, 'di ba? Syempre as yun naman ay manifestation ng democracy yung ating involvement sa iba't ibang issues sa society. So yun baka yun.
thank you. And I guess last question po from the audience. Can you talk about how you deal with burnout both individually or collectively?
Ako ba ang sasagot? Nawawala si Faye. Faye, nandiyan ka ba?
O,
Sige,
ikaw na lang muna, Ma'am.
yung burnout, siguro, actually, naging magandang, syempre nakaka-burnout na nakaka-stress talaga ang pandemic na ito at napakadaming mga challenges na dinala. But in dealing with burnout, I guess, sabi nga ng aming friend na activist at psychologist, panahon ay magpahinga. So we have to take rests. We have to find something that we can enjoy with, halimbawa, magbasa, magsulat, matulog, kumain, ano pa ba, magpahinga, makipagkwentuhan sa mga kaibigan. And it's also okay from time to time that we express our emotions, we cry. Kasi yun nga, we are not in the normal situation now. So I guess halaga din yun. At siguro sa mga writers din at sa mga artists at sa mga iba pang mga nagsusulat din, mahalaga talaga yung pahinga at panahon ay nagkukumustahan, nagbabahaginan. So, important sa atin yung pagkakaroon ng support system ng collective tulad namin sa Gantala. We make sure that napapakinggan yung bawat isa at nagkakaroon ng opportunity to share para naman somehow makatulong dun sa pagpapagaan at pagkakaroon ng ginhawa. Yun lang.
Thank you so much for answering all those questions super thoughtfully. And thank you to our audience for coming here tonight and making time for this conversation. We will be computing the raffle soon. So whoever won, the books from Gantala, we will be contacting you guys personally. But yes, stay tuned.
Please fill up the form in the chat. It's a feedback form, and we'll be selecting people who fill it up to receive books. So, again, for any attendee here, we're giving up to 500 pesos. Like, not exact, like, if it's a bit more than that, that's fine. Of books from your choice from Gantala Press and Shopee. So do fill up the form so we can arrange it with you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a
Night.
good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.